Chapter 3, Perception. Even though we did discuss this in class, I kind of wanted to go back over some of the slides that I used and some of the information that we may not have been able to discuss in class. This way, while you're working on your presentation, you can go back and look at anything in this video that you need to. So remember, there are 3 steps to the perception process. There's selection, organization, and interpretation. Selection is selecting the stimuli that you choose to keep. So when you look at a situation or when you look at a person, what is it that you learn to keep, that you attract to and that you stay on? And that's usually what your first impression of that person is going to be. Just like the example with the healthcare workers who said someone was in the bathroom, they noticed their shoes, and then they didn't wash their hands. That's the stimuli they kept. And forever, whenever they see that woman, they're going to think, you didn't wash your hands. No matter what, no matter if she is super nice, it's always what they're going to keep. The second part is organization. Think about that filing cabinet. We put people into one of the 4 different categories, right? So we put them in either a prototype, stereotype, and that way we keep track of who they are. So we may say, oh, that person that wears those shoes never washes their hands. So anytime that anyone else has those shoes on, you're going to associate that stimuli with that one person. So you're organizing it. And then interpretation, how you interpret their behavior. And so remember, a part of interpretation is those attributes that we attribute to them, right? We attribute their characteristics to something about them. Whether that is really truly them or not, that's what we're doing. We are interpreting their behavior. So that's the perception process. And then you had your journal entry, and then in organizations we had prototypes, personal constraints, stereotypes, and then scripts that we use against everyone. And this is how stereotypes are developed. And that was a question that I asked you in class. How are stereotypes developed? Well, they're developed by the stimuli that we choose to keep, and then ranking all of those people together when we organize them. And then that's where stereotypes kind of break down communication, because we already start to think, I'm not going to listen to them. I don't want to listen to them. Why would I? Because they don't do X, Y, and Z the right way. The personal constraints, you can think of it, I like how the book refers to it as that yardstick to where they measure up. Where do they measure up with how you think someone should be? Obviously, if we go back to that whole example about the healthcare workers came up with washing their hands, well, in your mind, you're a nurse, you're a doctor, your hands should be clean at all times. So the measuring of that yardstick, they may not measure up to where you would measure up or where you think they should be. A part of the perception is that we think that everyone, Jezebel makes an appearance. We think that everyone should be exactly the way that we are. We think that everyone should live up the way that we live up. We hold expectations for people, and that's where that personal constraints come from. So our influences on perception are the physiological, expectations, age, and culture. So going back just a little bit about what we talked about, thinking about the physiological, the way that they physically look. Think about that nonverbal chapter. And it could also be our physiological, whether we're sick or not, whether we feel well, whether we're stressed or not. And then that's going to shape the way that we perceive others and situations. So think the next time that you're around someone and you select that stimuli to keep, think, and it was negative. And remember, part of our perception is that we also want to perception check with someone else, and they have a different perception of it. And then it could be the way that you were feeling or the way that you were stressed out. Maybe you just received an email that really upset you. Why did that upset you? Where were you in that headspace? Also, that expectation. I have high expectations for everyone. I want everyone to have the same work ethic, like I said, that I do, but not everyone does. So that influences our perception on situations and others as well, is our own expectations, which can hinder us and hinder the way that we communicate. Our age, and then of course our culture. What do we believe in versus what they believe in? So improving perception, how can we prove it? improve our perception of others, thinking partial and subjective, knowing that our perception is going to be that way, that it is a subjective. It's the way that I look at something, the way that you look at something, and then sometimes those don't work. It's like thinking about empathy, right? Empathy is all about putting ourselves into someone else's shoes, in someone else's situation. Would we be able to do it? So that's that partial and subjective. It is partial to our beliefs and self-serving bias, and it is subjective. Avoid mind reading, perception check with others. So go back to other people and say, do you feel the same way that I do? Did you see this? How do you read this? I've done that on a number of occasions. Looked at someone who's in that little circle, right? And said, am I reading this wrong? Is it just because I'm stressed and I don't feel good? Acknowledging that maybe my physiological is having a different experience or influence on that situation or that perception. Facts and inferences, watch out for those, and then self-serving bias. Does this help me in some way? Because that's a really good thing to think about when we're thinking about perception. Going back to the whole interpretation, which can also be called the narratives. Narratives are stories that we attribute to other people. That's that attribution, right, in that organization. Is it an error? Did we simply make a mistake? Because we could have. That person may be lovely and wonderful, and we were like, no, right? So what did we do? And then monitoring the labels, which goes back into stereotyping of what we've done. If you do that, if you look at those things or those items on a way to improve perception, you're going to have a better communication experience. You're going to be able to watch that you don't fly off the handle. At other people. You're going to be able to view things in a very different and healthy way. So that's it on the perception and the communication, and I will see you soon.